It's official, folks. The Kansas City Chiefs have a 53-man roster, or at least an initial one. What does it look like and what does it mean today? I'm Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, folks. Glad that you're here. Your team has been set, at least from the very get-go. We're brought to you today by Gametime. Get the Gametime app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and you get $20 off of your first purchase. They do have terms that apply, but Gametime, download it today. It is what time it is at Gametime. Lots of Gametime coming. We have what the churn and waiver ads and all these kinds of things could be. That's coming up later in the show. They made a couple of trades that have some impact. We'll get to that coming up next. Thanks for making us your first listen. We appreciate you getting in here and liking and subbing and hitting the bell on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Make sure you check out another Locked On show for your next one. Get us on the text line at 816-357-8781. And check out Matt Derrick, our primetime guest, every Wednesday show, but particularly for this one, over at ChiefsDigest.com and Chiefs Digest on YouTube. Thank you, guys. Matt, just hot off the presses right now, we have the 53-man roster. A few surprises on it, but let's take a global view. What stands out that we didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, probably just a couple of the trades that obviously took place in the last 24 hours is one that jumps out as kind of a surprise that shakes up the roster a little bit. I can't say that some of the numbers surprised me. A couple of the names did surprise me. I think the biggest one is we're probably going to talk about quite a bit is Ethan Driscoll, the undrafted free agent tackle, making it over Lucas Niang as one of the backup tackles. And, this is the initial 53. Things can always change, but I think that one's pretty interesting. Also, I mean, the Chiefs wanted to keep 10 defensive linemen. Looks like they're keeping 9 for now. That could be an area where they're just continuing to look for some help on the defensive line through waivers, through whom's available right now. Maybe there was a trade that they were interested in that couldn't get done. We'll see if they have anything else up their sleeve, but that was a little surprising to me. And then, in the secondary, a couple of names. It seemed like Nick Jones was really facing an uphill battle to make this roster again, but he is here. Keith Taylor, who looked like maybe he was closing the door, doesn't make it, but a rookie free agent, Chris Roland Wallace, moving to safety, he's on the 53 roster. It's one of the feel-good stories of camp.
A lot of surprises there, and a couple that weren't so much. I'm glad they saw the light on CRW, but the wide receiver group in particular saw a couple of big names depart today. Kadarius Toney being one of them. I think it was about time for that. They just had reached the end of their road there. Justin Ross also put on waivers today. Do believe that he could land back. My question to you before we run down the position itself is, do you think Justin Ross can clear waivers and be able to come back?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Nico Remigio, I think, will be a tough one because maybe there's a team out there that's definitely looking for an immediate impact as a potential return specialist, and that's where I think Nico could immediately come in and make an impact. Kadarius Toney, I think it's probably time to turn the page, look for a fresh start. Obviously, the Chiefs would be helped out from a financial standpoint if a team claimed him off waivers, because that would save them from the $2.5 million guaranteed cap hit that he has. If he clears waivers, he can sign with another team, but that the Chiefs are still responsible on the hook for that cap hit. So it's not a huge amount, but every dollar matters when you're an NFL team up against the salary cap like the Chiefs are in many, many years, and they're trying to pay guys. So that's a significant little crunch right there. Justin Ross is another category completely. I would imagine that there are probably still teams that would be fearful of Ross because of the medicals. Obviously, that was a key reason why he was undrafted in the first place. He's had another foot surgery since then, hasn't by any evidence had any trouble with the back, but I would have no doubt there's a few teams that would simply have him off their list because of the medical issues, but there might be some absolutely who are going to say, wait a minute, that's a guy that maybe we can get right and find the right way to use, and we'll take a chance on him. If they clear waivers and it comes down to picking the best team for them, I think Remigio and Rice ends up back in Kansas City, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kadarius Toney landed elsewhere.
Folks, if you're looking for the 53-man roster, check out ChiefsDigest.com and check out both of our timelines on X. You will find it there. So we have one wide receiver to talk about in the next segment, but getting through that, it is Rice. Hollywood does stay on. No IR designation for Hollywood Brown, Worthy, Watson, the new acquisition, Sky Moore and McCole Hardman. Not a lot of surprise there. That is pretty much how I had it drawn up, except for the new addition. Does that give them enough right now with not putting Hollywood Brown onto IR? Do you think that that's enough firepower to enter the season right now?
I mean, I look at this on paper and I see a pretty good group, Brian. I mean, if Juju Smith-Schuster is your fifth receiver, and, we're talking about that's when Hollywood Brown is healthy, that could be a ridiculous receiving room. I mean, I think it's difficult to expect, a couple of years older, a couple of more years on those knees. It's probably too much to expect Juju Smith-Schuster to be a 900-yard receiver again. But, whatever he can be as your fourth or fifth receiver, that seems like an incredible spot. I mean, because this guy was your number one receiver a couple of years ago, and now you're talking about him being your number five. Last year you were talking about Sky Moore being a starter for this team. If McCole had been here in week one, he probably would have been a starter for this team a year ago. Now those guys are your 6 and 7s. So I don't think there's any doubt this room has been rebuilt. I was really intrigued to hear Juju Smith-Schuster talking about this room to us on Tuesday. He's a big fan of Hollywood Browns. He's really been impressed by Rashee Rice, watching him, play his position on this team a year ago on TV, and now seeing Xavier Worthy's speed up close and personal. I mean, I think there's a reason to be optimistic that this receiver room can be a whole lot better than it was a year ago. Is there still a problem with the fact that you're carrying 7 receivers? And is that, too many chefs in the kitchen? It could be. We'll find out. But I don't think that this is like last year where you kept 7 receivers because you didn't have any. This year, this seems like a pretty deep group. It's just that you've got some question marks that you're just not sure which way they're going to go.
And those answers might come in some of the other position groups. 4 tight ends, including the new acquisition. It was Irv Smith that didn't make the roster. Just 3rd running back spot. Carson Steele squarely on there with Clyde Edwards-Helaire sticking on the roster. Thought we might get an IR designation there. That was a possibility. The O-line group, all the 5 starters as we would expect. But as you said, Caliendo, the only significant starting experience on the backup offensive line. Lonnie Morris, a few games, yes. But that's insignificant next to Caliendo. Then you have Driscoll, Hansen, Norzad, the 3 rookies. This is a young offensive line group that has to be able to sustain through this season, especially early. Bengals, Ravens off the bat. I don't think they'll be pressed into service, but was young bodies clearly the consideration here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be really interested to see how, Brett Veach and Andy Reid break down the decision about Ethan Driscoll over Lucas Niang. I mean, obviously that is younger. I think you're also talking about maybe a little bit more athletic at that position. Driscoll, I think that the general consensus was, needs a bit more strength. That was maybe a reason why that, maybe a practice squad would be good for him. Chiefs might have just been concerned about losing him. And let's face it, I mean, they've been enamored with Driscoll since rookie minicamp. I mean, that's the guy that you really heard maybe the most about amongst the undrafted class. And, he's one of, I think, 3 undrafted rookies to make this team, but he's impressed them every step of the way. So them keeping him shouldn't be a big surprise, but you're right. I mean, you've got 3 rookies, backing up, and you got 4 rookies, I guess, all told with, Kingsley on this team. They're definitely firmly a foot in three-peat with having, their offensive starting line back and fully intact, except for Kingsley stepping in there for Donovan Smith. But they're also firmly considering the future, knowing that you don't have Trey Smith signed, knowing that, you might not have Joe Tooney in the future, but you've got, a couple of young interior linemen that can compete for that spot in the future. And you've got a couple of young, athletic tackles that are prospects for the future too. Maybe not just left tackle, but, is Ethan Driscoll a future right tackle in place of Jawan Taylor? Chiefs are telling you with this move that they think he might be.
Yeah, there is a lot that they're telling us here. They're also telling us where they had to get a little bit more aggressive. They were able to do that with a couple of trades. What do they mean with the new acquisitions? It's coming up next. Getting your tickets to Arrowhead just got easier. Whether you're looking for that week 1 against the Ravens, week 2 against the Bengals, or even week 5 when they come back in October for the New Orleans Saints, they have a new feature at Gametime called Gametime Picks. And it takes all the guesswork out of getting your tickets. It makes it easier to filter out the fluff and get the incredible deals on seats that you don't want to waste time searching for through those thousands of tickets. Get Gametime Picks. The curation makes it easy to get all the sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, anything that you're looking for. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off of your first ticket purchase at Gametime. It's last-minute tickets. It is lowest prices, and it's always guaranteed. If it's fantasy season, you need some help, make sure you listen to Locked On Fantasy today. With Vinny Iyer, you want to get after that and get your drafts underway. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Or you can like and sub and hit us here. Make sure you get over to ChiefsDigest.com so you can get all of Matt's work. I'll put that up here on the screen so you guys can see that. And here on YouTube. Get over with Chris and I on KC Chiefs Corner, RGR Football, NFL 33, and you can even get into the Rogue Analytics if you want to see the athletic matrices of some of these players. The Chiefs had to get aggressive over the last 36 hours anyway, Matt. And I love to see this because we always talk about, what are the possibilities? What could you do? Low risk, in my opinion, for both these ads. In particular, Cam Thomas was a guy that got drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. I had him as one of my top fits for this defense because of the athleticism, because of the length, and because of his explosiveness in Spag's system. Now they get him on the cheap in exchange. What was it, a 7th round pick here? That goes a long, long way to a room that I think needs a little bit of oomph. He started off hot rookie season, working under and next to J.J. Watt, and then just kind of hit a coaching change that I think derailed him in terms of his progress. I'm excited for his prospects in this defense. What do you see?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's the thing that jumps out to you about what I would say is the back of his football card is the stark difference between 2022 under Vance Joseph and 2023 last year under the new regime in Arizona. And that could be a reason for concern because you're talking about going from a 3-4 to a 4-3, and he struggled in the 4-3 last year. But to your point, I mean, he seems like the perfect physical fit for Joe Cullen and for Steve Spagnuolo. So that's why you think that this might be the appropriate place for him. And it fits in with the Chiefs' strategy of buying low. I mean, this is a player that, had a very solid rookie season, looked like it was progressing, and then takes a step back in year 2. If you can acquire a player like that for a 7th round pick, and he was a 3rd round pick the first time around. I mean, that was, 2 years ago. That's crazy value. So if he can become the player that he looked like as a rookie and looked like coming out, that's a tremendous deal for the Chiefs. And that was the area that they've been targeting for trying to bolster their depth since the beginning of training camp, and just hadn't been able to find the solution. And, one of the things holding them back is that they weren't looking to pick up a lot of payroll or salary. So this was not a case of the Chiefs willing to go out and pay money for an expensive veteran or even a moderately priced veteran. They weren't going to go out and spend $5 million for a 34-year-old defensive end. They also weren't going to be picking up somebody with a ton of money, and they weren't going to be trading for someone that needed a new contract. So this is what they were looking for: players under cost control, under a rookie deal. They got a couple of years left. And Thomas, I mean, is a perfect fit for what they were looking for. Low risk price. I mean, the 7th round pick is marginal at best. So, and where does he come in stacked up? I mean, I think you'd absolutely say that he's probably their number 4 defensive end. I mean, I'd slot him somewhere between Felix and Malik Herring. Maybe he can become more than that. But if he can be a key rotational piece for you on the edge, that's a great pickup.
Yeah, I love the fit. We'll see how he comes and how he acclimates here. Again, another fit here. Clearly, Irv Smith was not working out in terms of giving them what they needed. I think this was partially a fit, partially a performance issue here. They make the trade for Hendershot, bring him over, a guy that is more physically imposing, can block a little bit, well, quite a bit better, and still gives you a little bit, I would say Blake Bell plus in the pass game, but definitely has a designation. Are you surprised they went with 4? And are you surprised that they traded for a fourth tight end and they had to give up capital for it?
Yeah, I was surprised because this was not really an area where it seemed like that there was a lot of concern about the Chiefs and what they had. And I'm not sure that even there is a lot of concern, but why him and not Irv Smith? I mean, I think would be one question. One certainly is special teams. Irv Smith is not a special teams player. He really hasn't played much special teams since his injury. Little bit his rookie year, but over the last 4 seasons, he only played 27 special team snaps. It's not a special teams player. Hendershot's played 200, 400, I guess it is over the last 2 seasons. Very experienced special teams player. So that's makes a lot of sense right there. And to your point, what I hear out of Dallas is that he's not a great blocker, but at his size, the tools are there. I mean, and even if he just kind of gets in the way, I mean, that's and has the willingness to get in the way, that'll be a long way. But because Irv Smith, I mean, I think he was a better blocker than he appeared to be, but he's an undersized tight end. So this is a completely different flavor of tight end. I mean, Irv Smith is more of the agile, quick, go catch the football. This is a guy who, I mean, he is a pass catching tight end, but he's a big guy. So you hope that maybe you'll teach a little bit, coach a little bit in him. He's got a rushing touchdown in his career. So, he's got that kind of fullback capability too. But yeah, I was surprised that they made the move. I mean, it makes sense from a roster balance standpoint. You've got another special teams player. And let's face it, I mean, if you're going to be the fourth tight end on a team, you need to be able to play special teams. And that was always going to be my concern about Irv Smith, was just that he's more of a number 2 tight end, number 3 at worst. But if he's a guy that can't play special teams for you, what's his role as the fourth tight end? This is a guy that certainly feels like meets a need that the Chiefs have as an extra tight end, because he's a different flavor than what they have. I mean, Irv Smith was very similar to me, especially size-wise, to Noah Gray. Peyton Hendershot is not any of the other 3 guys that they have. He's as a bigger, different player.
Yeah, you added a dimension here, and I think they had to. What could they add next? There is some churn that generally goes on after cutdowns, waiver ads, and the like. What comes next for the Chiefs coming up next? Now, this is my favorite part, Matt. With the Chiefs being 32nd, it's a disadvantage on this day at cutdowns when you're trying to make waiver acquisitions possibly. A number of them out there, some first rounders, some Brett Veach bait is sitting out there on the waiver wire. So I expect multiple claims are going to be put in, knowing that it's very unlikely they're going to get to those. Do you see anything actually getting to the Chiefs that they could use where a claim would go through? And if not, are there any veterans that have caught your eye on cutdown day that they should go after?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. I mean, the Chiefs, I would expect to put in some waiver claims. The chances of them getting one that falls to them, probably less than 10%. Clearly, I mean, you got to have 31 other teams pass on a player. Happened last year. Darius Rush, they claimed from the Colts and it came over, but that didn't work out. So even if they claim a player, doesn't mean that it's going to be a rousing success. Could still be trades, but those are much more likely after the deadline than it was before the deadline. These were, both, even Hendershot's a conditional pick. I mean, there's a chance that, if he doesn't meet the conditions of the trade, the Chiefs don't even give a 7th round pick to Dallas for him. It could be a clean deal. So, we'll see what happens. Do the Chiefs still have some areas where they'd like to maybe fill some gaps? I mean, they'd like to have 10 defensive linemen on the roster. They have 9. So, whether that is an extra defensive tackle, maybe, it's, we often see some of the churn, Ryan, is just simply bringing back the guys that you've released. And that's not, it's less common now because of the new injured reserve rules. And the Chiefs did not put anyone on injured reserve on Tuesday. They could have done that and still designated 2 of those players to return. They could have done it without putting them on the 53. So tells you that, hey, Hollywood Brown does not need to go on injured reserve to start the season. Najee Johnson, Joshua Williams not going to be missing the first 4 weeks of the season, most likely. So that's a good sign from a health standpoint. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of places that I think that this team would like to round out. And you talk about, players that are available. I mean, the one that jumps out to me the most is Samaje Perine, because he is a flat-out free agent. There's no waiver claim necessary. That's a guy that you can go get. Don't know if there's going to be any interest from the Chiefs. Don't know if he's willing to come to Kansas City for a visit even. But that's a player whose elite skill set really seems like it would fit with the Chiefs. But as far as position groups that I could still see them interested in, for whether it's a waiver claim or just a little roster churn, I think running back's a position they would look at. Offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, those are all positions I think that they would still. And hey, Brett Veach, it's always going to be best available player. So if there's a young player on a rookie contract who's just been cut, he's going to be interested, because he's always interested in, those players that they liked coming out of the draft. If they didn't work out somewhere else, he's always going to be looking at them to maybe think that they could reboot themselves in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's my focus as well, because it comes down to this, Matt. 9 days. 9 days. You get Derrick Henry and Lamar. They're going to run all over you. They're going to try to, and you have 4 defensive tackles on this roster. One who's barely had a whiff of training camp in Derek Nottie. I think that's a spot where you have to go churn. Maybe there's still a trade out there for something. I'm not sure at this point. Would it surprise you if they went into week 1 at kickoff with only 4 defensive tackles on the roster?
Yeah, it really would. I mean, especially because, throughout training camp, it looked like that tackle was the position group that they felt fairly decent about. And it was the edge that they didn't feel really good about. And, so to end up the other way around, I'm really kind of surprised. I mean, and I guess that just tells us, what they felt a little bit about that defensive tackle group. I mean, Neil Farrell was the guy they traded for a year ago and really didn't do anything for them. And now for them to essentially walk away from him and potentially lose him completely, I mean, that's a pretty bold admission that was not a winning trade. That was not a deal that they won with the Raiders. So a little surprised by that, but what are the Chiefs missing? I mean, they're really missing a run stuffer. Mike Pennell is their truly only run stuffer, and he's good. He's also 33, and Mike, I don't even know if Mike would say that he's like a true 0 or a 1 tech. I mean, they've got him playing there, but he's really the only guy that could play that role. And Derek Nottie, like you said, didn't play a ton in the preseason. Also isn't 100% yet. So you add all those factors together, and I think whether it's you're bringing back some of the guys that you just let go, whether it's adding one onto the active roster or adding a couple of them, keeping them on practice squad and having a practice squad elevation for the first couple of weeks of the season, I mean, I think you got to do something, because I can't see, going in to week 1 against the Ravens with 4 tackles and really no one outside of Mike Pennell that you'd really say is a reliable run stuffer right now.
Yeah, I have to agree. 5 linebackers make the roster. The starters plus Jack Cochran and Cam Jones, much as we had seen. Kudos to my guy CRW. Christian Roland Wallace, we'll call him Chris, has made the roster ahead of what a lot of people thought. Now, I don't care. I'm calling all these guys DBs. He and Shamari Connor, I believe, are going to flip roles all season long, so I'm not calling them safety versus corner. It doesn't matter to me. Nick Jones, as you said, got in with the Fab Five, and they're on the roster. They're ready to cook. Hopefully, Justin Reed is as well, and the rookie Jaden Hicks. It's, again, a very young group overall. Does that give you any concern?
I mean, my only concern with the defensive backs is that the Chiefs are concerned. I guess I'm still a little bit higher on this group than the Chiefs are internally. But I will say, I mean, I thought Nick Jones struggled during training camp. I thought he struggled during the preseason games, and I'm not sure that I saw a lot of growth from a year ago. So the fact that, you're going into this campaign with him as your 5th corner, especially with a couple of guys in front of him hurt, I think that is a acknowledgement that you're concerned about the cornerback spot, and I think they would still like to beef that up. I mean, I would have thought that if they were going to make 2 trades before the deadline, I would have guaranteed one of them was going to be corner, and the other one probably defensive end. They got the defensive end done, didn't get the corner done. I think they'd still be interested in that. I was really surprised that Nick Jones beat out both essentially Keith Taylor and Kelvin Joseph. I thought at times that both those guys had better camps than he did. Youth, Nick Jones is younger. I mean, you got more team control over him. He's cheaper. Maybe that's a big part of it. Special teams, big part of it too. Nick Jones can be a gunner, and especially with Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson, all dealing with things right now. Najee and Joshua Williams would probably be your two top gunners right now. They're both hurt. So now would it be Nick Jones and Chris Rowland-Wallace? Probably. I think special teams probably played a big role for both of those guys, probably more Nick Jones than Chris Rowland-Wallace. I think that there's definitely a lot more trust with Rowland-Wallace if needed defensively right now than with Jones. Your guys, CRW, Brian, he had a heck of a camp in preseason. I mean, his rise from rookie minicamp to now it's been just as extraordinary as Carson Steele's. It's just Steele's story has kind of overshadowed him.
Sure. Yeah. Somebody's got to do that, right? You play good defense, you're not going to get the story. So let the guy with the hair go. It's going to be fun. Folks, there will likely still be changes. We will break it down for you tomorrow. You can get all the breaking news over on Chiefs Digest on YouTube as well as the ChiefsDigest.com. And make sure that you're here and on RGR Football for all the Chiefs breaking news. Matt, thanks for filling us in. I know it's a crazy time. We appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely, Ryan. Anytime, my friend.
All right, folks, enjoy your evening. We'll break it down and jump back in if anything crazy happens. You never know with Brett Veach. But be back with us tomorrow as we break down the 53 as it exists and any additions. And then we get ready. Switch it over. We're talking about Baltimore. It's coming at you live. Thanks for